What is going on, guys? So it's been a while since I've done one of these videos, and I kind of wanted to go along with a video that I was doing at the Shambhala Center a couple weeks ago, and it has to do with the 4 truths that I've been practicing and that I've been learning ever since I started doing lucid dreaming again. I would say about a year or 2 years ago. And so those truths not only empower you in your life, but they bring about a sense of compassion for the world, for people, about yourself, as well as simply eliminating a lot of suffering in your life, making yourself more lighthearted, and you'll be able to take things a lot less seriously as you practice these truths and embody them. So let's talk about the truths. So before I get into the main truths, let's talk about what are the illusions and what are we constantly trying to do when we search out or try to get those things that we consider true or that we're striving for and all that kind of stuff. So first of all, we're always trying to increase our sense of permanence, increase our sense of identity. You can see it when we go after a job, a career, or a business, or a significant other. We're trying to increase our sense of self and solidify it to the point where we feel more real, more permanent. And that is one of the biggest illusions that I'm going to be talking about in terms of the 4 truths, which is the idea of solidifying ourselves, the idea of solidifying the view not only of reality but of ourselves, when essentially reality is very much impermanent and empty. So that struggle or that race or chase to solidify ourselves and to create ourselves into a more permanent identity or being tends to give way to a neurosis of greed, a neurosis of never being satisfied and never being happy and that sort of thing, because there's nothing that will ultimately solidify us, make us permanent, since in a sense we are definitely impermanent in terms of how we exist through our identity. All right, so here is the first truth. The first truth is that we live life asleep. If you've ever remember your dreams, or if you remember them on a constant basis, you'll probably realize that your dreams and what you think about in your dreams or what you feel in your dreams is very similar to the kind of things that you experience in your waking life. In other words, many times when I started doing the lucid dreaming stuff and I would record my dreams and remember my dreams on a regular basis, I realized that I was getting out of bed in the morning, but I was never really waking up. In fact, we tend to be not only asleep and tend to have the same emotions, same thoughts, and same type of illusions in our everyday life as we do in the dreams, but in addition, we tend to fall asleep during the day. If you ever had, if you ever daydreamed, like automatically, I'm not talking about visualization, but simply automatically you daydream, or you're thinking of the past, the future, you're worrying, or whatever it is. You are basically taking little mini naps. And so when you realize that, a lot of the time, not only when you sleep are you dreaming, but many times when you're awake, you're still dreaming. So you never fully wake up. And in fact, what I talk about in the practices that I do and that I encourage others to do is to simply become more aware and more conscious more and more time out of your 24 hours a day. That is basically it. So the first realization you want to know is that you are sleepwalking, that you're dreaming most of the day. In fact, not only when you're sleeping, but also when you are going about your everyday life. All right, so the second truth is that our true nature is that of absolute awareness and limitless mind reality, if you will. In other words, we tend to, not only be asleep, in our everyday life or in our sleep, we don't just tend to dream, but the biggest illusion within that dream is ourselves, our identity. Again, trying to solidify that identity and trying to make it more solid and more permanent. Like I was saying, there's nothing to be more of or less of You simply are. And so when you realize the truth that there is no you, there's no identity, there's no name, there's no past, and you relinquish those thoughts and, attaching yourself to those thoughts to, again, solidify yourself, then you can actually begin to live life more truthfully, in a way where you see others as yourself, which is going to be one of the next truths that I'm going to talk about, as well as you won't be taking life and yourself so seriously. And again, it's about letting go of your identity, letting go of trying to be someone that you are not, someone that you've been taught to be, someone that you've learned to be through your life, and letting this identity, this person, die. And although that sounds negative, it's actually a very liberating idea to be practiced and to be reminded of, which I will talk a little bit about towards the end of the video in terms of how do you practice these things and so on, so that they don't just become concepts like something that you read out of a book and then forget about it, and you go on to the next book about self-help, and then you never practice it and you never really truly grow personally, spiritually. That is truth number 2. It is one of the biggest truths you can have. It is so liberating because just like the dream, ourselves, we are a dream. We're an illusion, and we're the biggest illusion. We're the illusion that holds all other illusions together. In fact, if you could put a web onto all the other illusions, all the other stuff that goes on in terms of what I call the dream in your waking life, everything would come back to you. You support it all. You are the main, for a lack of a better word, problem. All right, and the third truth, you've probably heard it before, but realize your oneness with everyone and with everything. So one of the biggest illusions, again, is that we're separate, because, again, we want to solidify this identity and so on. So we want to make it permanent. The idea behind this, though, is much of our fear stems from that main illusion, that main false perception of reality, where we are actually separate from other people. When you begin to practice, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a hint of how I do it, but when you begin to practice, let's say before you go into a situation, knowing or remembering and reminding yourself that when you are about to interact with people, you're about to interact with yourself. That lends itself to a very powerful, or rather empowering, fearless situation, where if there is nothing and no one outside of you, then what do you have to fear? In other words, just like with the dream, the first truth that you're dreaming, if you realize that it's a dream and you begin to see it for that, you can begin to control it as a dream. You can begin to mold it as a dream. And just like that, when it comes to interacting with people, when you begin to see other people as yourself, then you can begin to be kind to yourself, to begin to really bring out the best reactions and treatment from people for yourself. Whatever you want, however you want people to show up, you simply begin to experience that. You choose it. You begin to choose it out of that truth that you are actually interacting with yourself when you interact with people. That, of course, applies to everything, in situations, life, and everything that you interact with. It is essentially a part of you. So you do have a responsibility, aka power, over that situation, over those people. Again, not in the traditional sense of controlling people, but rather getting to know yourself through others and knowing your essence, and knowing that there is, however they treat you is simply how you've been treating yourself. And that is an amazing, liberating truth when it comes to suffering based on other people's reactions to you. Truth number 4 has to do with the main idea that everything is impermanent. And this truth will liberate you from a lot of suffering. And will you still do it? Will you still get attached to things? Yes, but the fourth truth has to do with the idea, or the realization that everything is impermanent. Everything is impermanent and is always changing. So once you realize that, why would you hold on to things? Yeah, you can have things, but realize that just as things come into your life, they might just leave. Whether it's relationships, whether it's material belongings, material things, success, failure, for better or for worse, whatever you judge to be good or bad, it is only here for a moment. And once it passes, it just becomes a memory, it just becomes a dream. So when you realize that, you begin to let go more and more of attachment. So again, the way that you practice these truths, the first one, for example, these are all reminders. You simply remind yourself of these things. You can turn them into affirmations, very simple affirmations that you remind yourself of these things. Why are they so powerful? Because they open you up to a limitless reality where you begin to create at a much, much higher level with less attachment, more joy, you're more playful, you're taking things less seriously, less personal. So everything just becomes more real and you begin to interact with reality for what it is rather for what your identity wants it to be. I know that probably makes sense to you. I hope that feels right. And the way that you practice these things, again, is to remind yourself that you're likely living a dream. When you begin to see the dream as a dream, you begin to wake up. You begin to wake up from illusion. When you begin to see yourself as an illusion, you begin to let yourself die, let your identity die, so you become more limitless as well. And in a sense, you begin to become more of who you truly are, which is that awareness. And the third one, again, when you interact with people, when you interact with anything, situations, life, etc., realize that you are simply interacting with your own essence. And when you do that, again, fear dissipates, you begin to have more control and you begin to have more power over their situations as well as more peace. And the fourth one, accepting things as always changing and that nothing ever stays the same, you begin to let go of suffering. And so those are the four truths. I really am, adamant about practicing these on my everyday, life. I remind myself of these, and trust me, the effects that I have on people and the effects that I have on myself, if you get that idea, is incredible. You really can see the effect you have on life when you begin to live in this way and you begin to honor these truths. You begin to be more at peace and you begin to be more accepting, more loving, more compassionate, as well as more empowered in terms of creation, manifestation, and many other things. So I hope this video helps. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. Any questions that you have, I know it's a lot to take in and it's a lot to practice that is well worth your time. But yeah, any questions, put them down below and I'd love to answer them. So I'll see you guys on the next video. See you guys.